In the glitz and glamour of Hollywood, a long-standing issue lurks the neglect of black men. But why does this happen? What forces are at play? Let's pull back the curtain and explore. The perception that Hollywood's elites neglect black men or any other minority group is linked to the film industry's broader issues of representation and diversity. This perception is often driven by the following. Number 1. Historical underrepresentation. Historically, Hollywood has been predominantly controlled by white males, which has been reflected in the types of stories and characters that get portrayed. For a long time, roles for black men were often stereotyped or limited. Historical underrepresentation of black men in Hollywood has its roots in the early 20th century, beginning with the advent of film itself. During the earliest years of cinema, the few roles available to black actors were usually demeaning stereotypes. These often portrayed black men as lazy, violent, or unintelligent, perpetuating harmful racial biases. In many cases, white actors played black characters in blackface, a practice that persisted into the mid-20th century. The Jazz Singer, 1927, considered the first talkie or sound film, notably features Al Jolson in blackface. Throughout Hollywood's golden age, 1920s to 1960s, roles for black actors were limited primarily to secondary characters, often servants or comedic relief. Black men were featured prominently and frequently characterized by racial stereotypes. Notable exceptions like Sidney Poitier, who won an Oscar for Best Actor in 1964, were few and far between. However, black actors, directors, and writers remain underrepresented on screen and behind the scenes even with this progress. There's still a long way to go to achieve true equity in Hollywood, and the historical underrepresentation of black men has had long-lasting impacts that continue to influence the industry today. Number 2. Lack of opportunity. Opportunities for black actors, directors, and writers can be limited, creating a sense of neglect. This is due to factors such as a lack of diversity in decision-making roles, systemic bias, or a lack of connections or opportunities. At its core, there's a long-standing institutional bias in Hollywood. Historically, white men have predominantly controlled the film industry, and this lack of diversity among decision-makers impacts who gets hired and what types of stories are told. Systemic bias and nepotism can exclude individuals who lack traditional connections within the industry. Black filmmakers often face challenges in securing funding for their projects, especially when those stories are centered around black experiences. This extends to the green-lighting process, where projects are approved or rejected. The individuals with the power to green-light projects often prefer stories that reflect their own experiences, which can limit opportunities for stories about and created by black men. While progress has been made in recent years, there's still much work to be done in Hollywood to ensure fair and equal opportunities for black men and all underrepresented groups. This involves systemic changes in representation both in front of and behind the camera and in decision-making roles. Number 3. Stereotyping. Even when black men are featured in films and TV shows, they are often presented in stereotypical roles that fail to showcase the full range of their experiences and abilities. Stereotyping in Hollywood, specifically towards black men, is a deeply ingrained issue rooted in historical representations and cultural biases. Early in Hollywood history, black men were cast in subservient or menacing roles, reflecting the racial prejudice of the time. These roles were often two-dimensional, not allowing for nuanced portrayals. Characters were usually limited to roles like servants, entertainers, or criminals, painting a narrow and damaging picture of black identity and life. As the film industry evolved, so did the stereotypes, but not necessarily in positive ways. During the era of blaxploitation films in the 1970s, black men were often portrayed as streetwise, violent, or hypersexualized figures. While these films provided more prominent roles for black actors, they often reinforced negative images and social prejudices. Today, while opportunities have improved, black men still face typecasting and stereotyping. They may be disproportionately cast in roles related to crime, sports, or hip-hop culture. Alternatively, there's the stereotype of the magical Negro, a supporting character who exists primarily to aid the white protagonist, often imbued with mystical wisdom or abilities. These limiting portrayals can have serious implications. They narrow the range of roles available to black actors and affect how black men are perceived in society. Repeated exposure to such stereotypes can reinforce unconscious biases and misconceptions, impacting everything from social interactions to policies and practices in areas like law enforcement, education, and employment. Despite these challenges, many black actors, writers, and directors have pushed against these stereotypes, creating complex, humanized, and diverse representations of black men. Hollywood stereotyping is slowly being challenged, but it's a long-term process requiring systemic changes in how stories are chosen, who gets to tell them, and who is cast in leading roles. Number 4. Lack of recognition. The lack of recognition for black men in Hollywood is an enduring issue that contributes to the feeling of neglect. Many critics point to the industry's premier awards ceremonies, like the Academy Awards, as evidence of this issue. Historically, there has been a significant underrepresentation of black men in nominations and wins across most categories. This lack of recognition extends beyond acting roles. For example, it wasn't until 2020 that a black man, Steve McQueen, was awarded the Best Picture Oscar as a producer. And it wasn't until 2021 that a film directed by a black man, Nomadland by Chloe Zhao, won the Best Director Oscar. The lack of recognition in awards can affect career trajectories and the kinds of opportunities available to black men in the industry. Awards often lead to more visibility and greater opportunities in terms of roles and salary. When black men are underrepresented in these award recognitions, it can contribute to a cycle of limited opportunity. While recent years have seen some improvements, with more diverse nominations and wins, there is still a significant gap, demonstrating that the issue of recognition for black men in Hollywood is far from resolved. Number 5. Economic considerations. Economic considerations have long been used to justify the underrepresentation of black men and other minority groups in Hollywood. For decades, the prevailing belief in the industry was that movies with black leads or a predominantly black cast were less commercially viable, especially in international markets. Furthermore, the perceived risk associated with investing in films centered on black stories can lead to budget disparities. Films with black leads or black narratives often receive lower budgets, which can limit their production value, distribution, and marketing efforts. Similarly, black directors and producers may find it harder to secure financing, affecting the scale and scope of the films they can create. These economic hurdles not only restrict opportunities for black men in Hollywood, but also limit the diversity and richness of stories that reach global audiences, reinforcing the cycle of underrepresentation. Economic considerations play a complex role in Hollywood's treatment of black men, influencing both opportunities and recognition in the industry. The story is far from over as Hollywood grapples with its representation issues. Will the industry truly change? How will the voices of black men shape its future? Only time will reveal the answers.